Hello and welcome everybody, it's Stephen and I'm a popular investor on the eToro platform. Thank you very much for tuning into this video today, and as usual, if you could please like this video and subscribe to my channel, that would be awesome. And you can also find out more about me as an investor on my website, which is www.𝗬𝗵𝗀.com. So today I'm going to be doing a video which I explain a bit more about what happened last week in the markets, but also summarizing how we did overall for the month, because today is the 1st of August. I'm really pleased to say that we had a green month and we closed in the green at just over 1%. Which is actually a really good result. So to go over a little bit about how we did compared with the indexes, last week the major indexes such as the Nasdaq was down about 1.2% and the S&P 500 was down about 0.37%, and luckily our portfolio performed really well last week and was up about 3.5% for the week. So I'm very happy with this result. If we look at things from a monthly perspective as well, we also outperformed slightly the main indexes. So the Nasdaq was up about 0.9% for the month, and the S&P 500 was up about 0.3% for the month, and our portfolio was up just over 1%. So there was a slight outperformance there, which was really great. And if we look at some of the reasons why our portfolio did well last month, was also a lot of good movement in some of our crypto, such as Bitcoin, which had a really fantastic move in the last week of July. Other altcoins also performed really well as well, such as Ethereum and Neo, which was really good for our portfolio. Also, we saw some of our defensive stocks do really well last week as well. And some of that was to do with some of the concerns around COVID-19 and the increased number of Delta variant cases. So stocks in our portfolio such as Budgen, etc. performed really well despite some of these concerns. One of the darker spots in our portfolio last month was to do with some of our Chinese stocks in our portfolio, which kind of quite heavily weighed on our portfolio last month. And that is because China has become more and more involved and has heavy scrutiny to do with internet companies and also e-commerce companies in China. And we have quite a few Chinese stocks in our portfolio, such as Alibaba and JD.com. We also have some COVID recovery plays in our portfolio from China as well, such as 𝗏𝗏𝘵𝗵𝗀. And there had been some increased cases last month in the south of China, which had stopped a lot of the Chinese mainlanders being able to visit Macau and frequent the casinos, which has had a weighing effect on the stock overall. However, I don't consider this to last forever, and I think what will happen as the caseloads decrease and the vaccinations increase, we're going to see a lifting of some of those restrictions, and we should see higher visitor numbers in Macau, which I think will be good for the stock. So I think it's very undervalued at its current level. As we talk about now the US markets and what happened last week, it was actually dominated by three main themes. And the first theme was last week there was a meeting with the FOMC committee, which is the Federal Reserve Committee. And there was actually a speech by Jay Powell, who is the head of the Fed, who actually talked more about the fact that inflation was transitionary. But this time he actually described more about what he meant by transitionary. And it is not the fact that after a period of time that the prices will be rolled back, because that inflation has already been factored in. But what he actually meant was over time, the rate of inflation should start to decrease back to normal levels, which they consider at about 2%. He also hinted towards that they may start tapering policy. because the US, what they've been doing is they've been stimulating the economy by buying large amounts of government bonds, which in effect actually inflates the monetary supply. What they said is that we're starting to make progress towards the fact that they may be able to do this in the future. So they are not ready to do this yet, but it's been speculated upon that they could start tapering policy around towards the end of 2021. This is usually the first weapon that central banks use in order to be able to combat inflation. And also there are some concerns that what they may do is they may increase the interest rates earlier than expected. At the recent meeting from the Fed, they actually forecasted that interest rates would begin to rise at the end of 2023. However, there are some concerns in the economy that what could happen is they could bring this forward potentially to 2022. Although this does spook the market slightly, it's not something that I'm particularly worried about, because stock markets in the history have always performed well in different interest rate scenarios. The second major theme last week was to do with the earnings reports, and there were some really good earning reports last week, such as the results of Apple, which outperformed against analysts' expectations, as well as Microsoft and Alphabet as well, which also beat its expectations. However, there was an underperformance of Amazon towards the end of last week, and shares slumped pretty significantly, down about 7%, which weighed on the markets quite a lot towards the end of the week. The third major theme that had an effect on the markets in the US last week was to do with the Delta variant and the increased number of cases in the US. This spooked investors last week, because there was actually an announcement by the Disease Control and Prevention Unit in the US, which actually recommended for many people indoors to start wearing masks again. This was just a recommendation rather than it be mandatory, but this obviously scared investors and had a negative effect on the market. If we move over to Europe now, it was announced that the UK would start to accept Europeans and American citizens who had been double vaccinated from the 2nd of August without further quarantine. This is really good for the commerce between Europe, US and the UK. And this is also really good for the travel and tourism and leisure industries as well. So this was a real kind of positive thing that happened this week in Europe. The other thing that kind of dominated the news as well was to do with the labour shortage in the UK. And a lot of this is happening to do with the NHS app that many people were signed up to in the UK. And if you come into contact with anyone who has the COVID infection, this means that you get pinged on this app, which says that you have to then isolate or quarantine for a period of time. This has caused a lot of shortages in the labour market, especially in the service sectors, as many people have been forced to stay at home and quarantine. And it was actually said that there was over an 11% increase in the number of cases flagged in the app, and those people had to quarantine. There was also some data from Europe as well, which said that the economy had grown over 13.7% year on year, albeit from quite a low level. As we know, 2020 was a bit of an anomaly year. However, it's showing good signs for future growth in Europe. So crypto had a really good week last week, and Bitcoin in particular was actually up 24% for the week, and was actually the top performing crypto in the top 10. outperforming all other altcoins, including Ethereum, which was up about 15% overall for the week. However, there's been a lot of positivity in crypto over the last 10 days. And I think it all started with the B Word conference, which was with Elon Musk, Cathie Wood and Jack Dorsey, in which they discussed a variety of different areas in the Bitcoin sphere. And in particular, they discussed the environmental concerns about Bitcoin mining. And one of the key takeaways from that discussion was the fact that Elon Musk said that they're expecting in the near future for them to start to accept Bitcoin as a form of payments for their EV cars. So this produced a lot of positive sentiment overall in the market, and we've saw a consistent 10 days of green candles for Bitcoin, which is really a positive sign overall for Bitcoin. We also saw a large amount of Bitcoin actually being moved off exchanges to private wallets, which is a really good sign that these have gone to hodlers with a lot of conviction and are not planning to sell at this price. We've also seen some other good on-chain metrics as well, which shows that miners are now selling less and less Bitcoin. Because as you know, last month they were selling a lot of Bitcoin because they had increased costs around the Chinese miners having to move their equipment. However, the miners are anticipating that we're going to go a lot higher in price. So they are keeping their coins to themselves and not selling them on the overall market, which is a very bullish sign. I think if we can get over 43,000, I don't see much resistance there, and I think what will happen is it will then start to speed up the acceleration of the Bitcoin price. I'm expecting by the end of the year for us to have a very high Bitcoin price, and I would not be surprised if it was touching 100,000. We also heard last week that GoldenTree, which is a large hedge fund with over $41 billion worth of assets under management, has put Bitcoin on its balance sheet. We don't know yet how much exactly they have put on their balance sheet, but this is a very positive sign that more and more hedge funds are starting to get involved again in this space, and that some of these environmental concerns have started to dissipate. I also have a lot of COVID recovery plays, as well as Chinese stocks in our portfolio that haven't performed very well over the last couple of months. However, I'm very positive on these for a number of different reasons. So on the COVID recovery plays, I'm very sure that the number of vaccinations around the world is going to increase significantly. There may still be pockets of countries which don't have high uptake of vaccinations. However, I think that the major countries are going to be more and more vaccinated, and this will mean a much lower death rate, as well as hospitalizations also decreasing. And I do not expect us to go into large-scale lockdowns again in the future. And I think this will be very good for COVID recovery plays. And I think that there's often a lagging effect. I also think that although there has been a lot of interference from the Chinese government on internet and e-commerce companies, that it is not in their best interest to decimate the industry. I think what they're trying to do now is play quite a hard line, because they want to implement some of these new regulations and policies which will make sure that the Chinese companies play fair in the market, don't have monopolistic practices, etc. And what I see now is I see the fact that the prices have been driven down to such a level where I think that the Chinese internet companies are now very undervalued. I really want to thank all my awesome copiers who have been really committed and loyal over the last couple of months. As I understand that May and June were a little bit sticky months due to the crypto downturn. However, I'm really happy that we've had a positive month this month for July, and we've moved into the green, and I can see a lot of positive momentum and headwinds in our favor. And I think we are well positioned to do really well in the rest of 2021. We've achieved over 109% so far in 2021, and this is really a tremendous result. However, I'm aware that many of you would have started copying a bit later, so I'm not resting on my laurels, and I'm going to try and increase those profits for the rest of 2021. Know how hard you work for your money, so will I also ensure that I stayed very disciplined to my strategy, and also try to protect your capital in the best way I can. Thank you very much for listening to this video today, and as usual, if you have any questions, then please let me know.